When Starfield was released over 2 years ago, it received a lot of hate. If you saw anything related to the game, it was probably going to be negative.
Excuse me?
Everybody from the biggest content creators to most comment sections criticized Starfield and pointed out its many issues. A boring plot, dreadful companions, and horrible exploration, just to name a few. As time went on though, the support for Starfield grew louder and louder. Bethesda supporters claimed that most of the criticism was just a hate train, and that everybody hated Fallout 4 and Skyrim when they first came out too. It's not fair to compare Starfield to previous titles because it's a grounded sci-fi, not a fantasy. Today I would like to take a deep dive into every aspect of Starfield, what makes it good and what are its flaws. What could have been done to remedy the issues, and is the criticism fair and well-deserved, or are people overreacting and not giving the game much of a chance? So grab your favorite flavor, a boom pop, a chunks cheesecake, and let's grab jump to the next planet. The first thing I want to get out of the way is Copium. I want to address it as much as I can in this first section because when it comes to Copium, there are few other fan bases that huff it as hard as Bethesda stands. Ever since its release, I've seen so many excuses rationalizing why Starfield is the way it is, so much confusion as to why so many people hate the game. A lot of criticism is dismissed because, oh, everyone is just jumping on the hate train. Everyone is being too nitpicky. Stop comparing my beloved Starfield to other games. I won't deny that there are some people who capitalize on the hate Starfield gets, and there have been some weird complaints about the game, like for example, the whole choosing your gender drama. That was really stupid and irrelevant to the quality of the game. However, just because there are some bad actors doesn't mean that there isn't plenty of valid criticism. There are tons of problems, and being dismissive about it hurts everybody, especially the diehard fans. I believe we should be vocal about issues when it comes to these big AAA companies that keep giving us less and less quality. Let's not let them get away with it. When people say not to compare Starfield to other games, to me, it sounds like you just don't want us to see what we're missing out on. Yes, Skyrim and Fallout are different games with different styles and separate universes, but it's still a Bethesda game. It shares a lot of aspects with these older titles. While it's fair to want people to understand that this is a more grounded, realistic experience than just being an outright fantasy, you need to respect that this game literally has space magic. The goal of this video isn't to just blindly crap on Starfield or to make anybody feel bad for liking the game. I myself have been a Bethesda fan for a very long time, and I was beyond excited for Starfield. The reason that I bring up the amount of Copium is because at multiple points I will be using things that I have seen the fan base say over these 2 years on YouTube, on Reddit, or in various comment sections. For the main story, I'm just going to do a basic summary with how I felt about it in general, going over some key points. If I broke the whole thing down, then this video would probably be another hour long, and I have sections for other major parts of the game, like the factions and companions, so stick around for that. The general sentiment is that Bethesda isn't good at making main stories. You play it for the wonky Bethesda physics, the vast open world, and for grind maxing your smithing skill. While I also love these extra things, I disagree that their main stories are bad. I enjoy them. They aren't the greatest works out there, but they're not as bad as people make them out to be. Starfield's main story has some decent writing. It has a clear direction, while also providing some twist and a good climax. I've seen plenty of people say that it's the best story they've come up with so far. It's not my personal favorite Bethesda story, but I can recognize its quality. Sometimes it does fall a bit short and it can be generic, but in general, my bar for storytelling is a bit lower than, let's say, a movie or a show, because the gameplay aspect I feel is much more important in a video game. The beginning of the player's story is very basic on purpose, to allow you to roleplay the way you want instead of being tied to something. You're just an average blue-collar worker yearning for the mines and trying to make a quick credit. They immediately throw the big mystery of the artifacts at you. What is this weird metal thing, and why did it make me faint? To start your journey of figuring this out, some random dude comes out of nowhere and gives you a free spaceship. You give the artifact to this group called the Constellation, who thankfully, but also boringly, are the most neutral group that could get their hands on this artifact. They just want to find out more for the sake of exploration and science and friendship. They make you a member of their very exclusive group because you're the main character, I guess. All it takes is doing one outing and you're in the club. They're assuming that I even want to be a part of this snobbish group, or that I'm a good guy and not some evil assassin. So now that we've got an important objective to work towards, with finding more of these artifacts, it's time to do 1,000 side quests. At least that's how I usually play these types of games. But once you do finally get to collecting the artifacts, you might be surprised that some of these missions are actually kind of fun. Stopping a bank heist, a deal gone wrong, and having to settle things with a huge corporate rival, being the first person to discover superpowers. Then we start getting into the juicy stuff, like the big bad hunter guy who's been chasing you created a religion. Or wait, no, it was his other self who also happened to be the hunter at one point but then settled down and wanted to teach people things. Your best friend dies, but then oh no, it turns out another version of them is a new third-party person called the Emissary who turns out to be very against the hunter. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention this is a multiverse situation? I am very biased against multiverse stories. For a very long time, I've been so sick and tired of multiverse stuff. Over the past X amount of years, there has been multiverse after multiverse, and for me, it almost always ruins a story. It makes it feel like there's no consequences, no stakes, nothing is permanent, and everything is possible. Wow, it's so trippy that on Multiverse World number 548, there's a version of this character who likes the color blue instead of the red. To be honest, I don't think that Starfield adds much to the whole multiverse gimmick. To give them some credit, it is kind of cool how they incorporated it into the New Game Plus system, and there is a chance that the universe you next spawn in has some differences. I couldn't stomach playing much of a New Game Plus, so I hadn't seen many of the changes that can occur, but from what I've seen from other people, it can get pretty crazy, like being able to have yourself as a companion. But other than that, there's just not much to it, and you have to play through the story many times to really experience all of the quirky stuff. So it's super diluted by the amount of time you have to put in. You might argue that it adds to the replayability, and I would agree, because like I said, Starfield does have a decent main story, but everything else makes me not want to return to this game. So this interesting mechanic just isn't enough. When the main story starts coming together and rising to its climax, we learn more about the religion that the Hunter's counterpart made, about who the Starborn are, and what their goals are. The Hunter is a maniac who wants to reach the Unity as many times as possible to gain power and will stop at nothing to do so. The Emissary, on the other hand, wants to control who gets to the Unity by only selecting who they deem worthy. They believe by doing this, it will prevent absolute chaos. You might view the Emissary as authoritarian, and the Hunter as a first-come, first-served type of guy. I like how they present both sides of the argument, and for me, I was conflicted on what to choose. They manipulate the player in an interesting way of having the Emissary be a copy of the close companion that had died earlier in the story. Having that emotional element can make the player automatically choose the Emissary, but when you speak to the Hunter and hear him out, what he's saying can start to make sense, and you might like that he has a straightforward, no bullshit attitude. Hey, at least he's honest, even though he's a mass serial killer, am I right? For me personally, on my first playthrough, the Hunter was rubbing off on me, and I decided, you know what? He's kind of right. Only the worthy get the Unity, and guess what? I'm the only worthy one. Screw both of you. I rejected both of them and had an epic three-way battle. Which, by the way, the last fight of the game was also exciting and fun. After the battle is done, you meet God, or an alternate version of yourself, or maybe just a representation of the Unity itself. The Unity is a bridge that connects all of the multiverses at a single point. It's your final destination in your current universe, a vehicle to the next. I really liked the ending to Starfield, the final battle, the Unity, and the way it all comes together. However, this is why I call this game a linear game. The final choices of the game should be the most impactful, but in this game, they all lead to the same outcome. I really wish that choosing between the Emissary, the Hunter, or neither would have significantly different outcomes. This isn't some end-of-the-universe story. There isn't some all-powerful big bad antagonist who's solely out to get you. There isn't a race against time, and honestly, there aren't many stakes at all. This is an exploration story. You're a part of an exploration group, and the whole point of everything is to explore the unknown. In a way, it's an isolated story because it doesn't impact anything outside of the main stuff. Maybe none of that is an issue for you, or maybe it really throws you off. I'm somewhere in between. I've seen the point that this game takes place after this big, huge civil war between the Freestar Collective and the UC, and that the story should have taken place during that. In Bethesda's defense, I think that they were trying to avoid yet another civil war type of storyline, and I do get that. It would have made the game much more interesting and given it some much needed stakes, but again, they clearly wanted the story to revolve around exploration, and that's exactly what they did. So while Starfield's main story has some ups and downs, it was a pretty decent effort by Bethesda, and there's not too much I would change other than having more meaningful, impactful choices. Unfortunately, it's a very linear story with the illusion of choices. Arguably, I think it's one of the best parts of the game, and if you just played the main story and the faction quest, you'll probably have quite a bit of fun. Thank you to today's sponsor, you, the viewer. I'm still a very small channel, and recently I've been working really hard to get some more content up and going, and so if you could drop a like, a subscribe, that would be really helpful. I also have channel memberships activated if anyone is willing and able to become a member. I'd greatly appreciate it. Although I don't really have any perks right now, I would like to have some in the future. Thank you to anyone who supports me. Anyways, back to the video. Speaking of faction quests, let's move on to that next. If you're new to Bethesda games, then you might not understand what they do with factions. Usually the formula is they have a main quest with an overarching story, multiple factions that you can join that have larger quest lines, almost like the main quest. Then you have all of your side quests and then the repeatable quests. The faction quests are usually what we look forward to because it's where we get the most role-playing potential, like joining the Dark Brotherhood in Skyrim to live out your edgelord fantasies, leading the Minutemen and building a stronger community. In Fallout 4, the factions were more tied to the main story, but Starfield took a more Skyrim approach where the factions are huge extra content, and there are some really good stories in these factions where they hit the nail on the head. Let's start with my favorite faction, the Vanguard. This faction, in my opinion, has the absolute best storyline in the entire game, and honestly, I think it's way better than the main story. If they would have gotten rid of the multiverse stuff and the Starborn and superpowers and replaced it with the danger of terramorphs and dark secrets of the governments, I would not be mad at that at all. You join up with the local civilian militia, whose goal is to help other civilians in need and assist in the UC's military. This is the closest thing you'll get to being a part of any sort of military. After doing your ship combat training, they send you into the thick of it.
Be quiet.
There's a distress call that they think will be good for a newbie like you, just a simple repair of a comms device. Yet when you get there, everyone's dead, and there are some crazy noises coming from somewhere deep, and you investigate, and there's like a single woman who managed to survive a terramorph attack. Already, the first mission is great. It's giving you suspense, your life is in peril, and even a little bit of horror as you sneak around, trying to avoid the detection of the monster itself. As you progress through the Vanguard storyline, you find out a lot about the universe and its lore. You learn a lot about the war and some of the screwed up stuff the governments were doing, and then of course you have a war criminal under wraps, hidden in the military's basement. You learn that the terramorphs are actually these little worm guys that you barely paid any attention to because they seemed harmless. Just a really, really solid story. The only issue I have with it is the final choice, once again, doesn't matter. Picking the Assaylees or the microbe has no significant differences. I do like that if you pick the Assaylees, you will occasionally find some out in the wild on some planets. Other than that, it's just an illusion of choice. There's also some loose ends with the war criminal. You can choose to tell on him or not, and again, not much impact there. If you lie for him, you keep doing general repeat quests, and that's about it. Also, while I love the Vanguard quest line, something that bugs me about it is that I was expecting it to be more centered around the spaceships. First off, they're supposed to be special pilots. Second off, the first thing that they have you do is send you to a virtual spaceship combat simulator. I felt kind of cheated by the end because I was expecting some sort of huge dogfight or something to happen at one point. So while I love the storyline, I kind of wish they gave the terramorphs to another faction so that we could have had some epic space battles or invaded some space stations or literally anything to do with ships. Switching it over to what I think is the second best faction questline, the Crimson Fleet. Now if you did the Vanguard stuff first, You might have been offered to join up with SysDef, which is the UC group that is fighting the pirates. On my first playthrough, I accidentally stole some dinner from one of those fancy restaurants in New Atlantis, and the next thing I knew I was talking to Ikande about going undercover and infiltrating the Crimson Fleet. I love a good spy story, and mixing it up with pirates was interesting. Setting up your identity as a scoundrel to fool the pirates and then gaining their trust over time and doing some shady missions. My favorite from this faction is the breaking the bank heist. It was so much fun infiltrating a luxury yacht while at the same time you're infiltrating as a pirate. There are some really fun quests to have with the Crimson Fleet. If you find yourself sympathizing with the pirates, or maybe you wanted to be one from the start, you can easily turncoat and side with them. There are some chill ass people on the Crimson Fleet. What I like about this faction is there actually feels like there's some consequences to your actions. What side you choose has you blowing the other side up. So if you liked some of your pirate buddies, it can make you feel a bit guilty blasting them apart. Even in the beginning, when you first meet Ikande, you can choose to fully deny him, and instead the fleet will contact you, and it will fully lock you out of the SysDef part of the story. What I don't like is that if you choose to side with the pirates, it seems like the UC in general doesn't give a crap, even though SysDef was a heavily funded military asset. You destroy a very expensive fleet. You should be considered a dangerous terrorist, but nobody cares. Similarly, if you side with the pirates, you can still do bounties towards them, and all you gotta do is pay a fine and you're good with them. So this is where the quality of the factions, in my opinion, starts to fall off. Ryujin Industries. You would think the Crimson Fleet story would have been full of sneaky stuff, but it was more straightforward than that. Ryujin is more of a James Bond style stealth. There's just not much to say here. This is probably the most forgettable faction. Bethesda has never been that great at stealth mechanics, and that's especially true for Starfield. A lot of the missions they tried to design around stealth, it was a mess. The concept was interesting, but the execution was abysmal. There's also a lot of yapping because there's some complicated company politics going on that pretty much has nothing to do with the player, so that can get a bit boring as well. It's almost like they try to give off a more serious atmosphere, but it came off as overdramatic. The super special thing about Ryujin is supposed to be this weird brain implant that you can get called the Neuro Amp. It's the closest thing we have to being a cyborg, so I always get it myself, even though it kind of sucks. But if you plan on getting it, or really doing any of the Ryujin questline, I recommend leaving your companions behind because they are nagging crybabies when it comes to anything here. And last, and certainly least, is the Freestar Rangers faction questline. I hated this one. I don't think Bethesda got the cowboy aesthetic or the western feel right, so I don't like the Freestar stuff in general. They come off as whiny libertarians who want you to desperately think they're a real cowboy, and it's really cringe. There's two things that I'll talk about here, which are my two biggest disappointments with this faction. First off is the Ron Hope problem. Ron Hope is a member of the Freestar Collective Council of Governors. He's a huge CEO. Everyone around here loves him to the point where he's almost worshipped. When you first talk to the Rangers about Ron Hope, they warn you to be extra careful around him because he's extremely important. The story starts off good enough. There's a big mystery where someone is hiring ex-soldiers to intimidate local farmers into selling their land. Well, it turns out Ron Hope is the one doing it because he's a capitalist who wants all the monies. Yada, yada, yada. You end up confronting him about it, and you can either let him pay you off or you can kill him, and that's pretty much it. You can't arrest him, even though you're the equivalent of a space cop, and he refuses to surrender, so you have to kill him. Even if you use a knockout weapon, he still dies. The worst part of all of this is that there seems to be no major consequences for him dying. Even though he's supposedly a pillar of the Freestar Collective, the leader of the Rangers doesn't even have that big of a reaction. Damn. The second problem with the questline is probably something you've heard a million times since the game's launch, but I still have to talk about it. There's no mech boss. Throughout this entire questline, you see these giant mechs, and the main group of enemies you're fighting are the people who worked on and used these giant mechs. I'm not saying they had to have a ton of these mechs roaming around to fight, but at the very least, there should have been a final boss mech. There is an unfortunate reality when it comes to side missions in most RPG games today. The notorious fetch quest. Bethesda games have always had a major issue with fetching random trinkets in return for a few measly dollars. Sometimes they put a lot more effort in making a fetch quest enjoyable. Most of the time, it's usually go to point A, talk to grandma who lost her expensive wedding ring that her late husband gave her, go to point B, fight a few thugs, find the ring in a treasure chest at the end of whatever dungeon, and then return to point A. Starfield is especially egregious with filler quests, not just with the quantity, but the quality of them as well. It became glaringly obvious to me early in the game when I first arrived at New Atlantis and started picking up all of the side quests that I could. These quests are soulless, meaningless, and obviously meant to waste as much of your time as possible. There's one quest that I want to talk about that really stands out to me. It's called A Tree Grows in New Atlantis. Well, it's 3 different quests and has 3 different names, but I'll just refer to it by its first name. It's very similar to the Blessings of Nature quest in Skyrim. Both are about restoring a big old tree in the middle of the first major settlement you visit. Both are also fetch quests. Let's do a very quick walkthrough. You talk to a tree nerd who has concerns about the giant tree, blah blah blah. He talks a crap ton, so I'm gonna skip a lot. So you go and retrieve some sensors. There's a poor kid that sold one for some pocket change, so you either have to steal it or pay a measly 100 credits. Take the sensors back to Tree Nerd and listen to him talk for like an hour. That's the end of the first quest. Pretty riveting stuff so far, right? Anyways, after sitting on a bench for a couple of days, the Tree Nerd is ready to give you the next quest, which is to fetch some data from a rival nerd. The rival nerd doesn't want to give up the data for free because of course not. He wants you to break into someone's house to delete some performance reviews. Okay, some pretty risky illegal stuff. This is where this quest is going to get interesting, right? Nah, the only person in this building is a tiny robot that couldn't care less about your existence. Great. At least there's some gossip on his computer about the tree nerd. So you get the data, return it to the tree nerd, listen to him talk for hours, and then wait on a bench for the next mission. Okay, this next mission has got to have some sort of epic climax. I mean, it's got to. So what are we doing, tree nerd? Fighting some weird epic aliens or doing something extra sneaky?
I need that branch.
Oh, we're fetching another random thing. Okay, I'm skipping that. We give him the dumb branch, and he finds out the tree is a gooner, and it's about to bust. So we have to relieve it by matching its freak. We have to go to the news station and hack into the mainframe. Okay, here comes the challenge, guys. Hold on to your seats. Oh, come on, for real? It's this easy to hack into the local news network in this advanced society? And, yeah, that's the quest. We were successful with helping the tree goon. Skyrim's Blessings of Nature isn't a perfect quest. It has flaws, but it's still much better than this junk. It has a unique weapon, a beautiful, unique location, a couple of semi-difficult fights, a choice between a peaceful or violent ending, and finally, a visual change with the tree that proves you did something impactful to the environment. It's sad because I think Starfield does have side quests with lots of potential. The little storyline that the tree grows in New Atlantis is cool, but they should have done a lot more than fetching 100 things. Maybe some public chaos during the climax when the tree's about to explode. Maybe add a couple of impactful choices where you have to uproot the tree and a lot of people get mad, or an evil choice where you help the tree explode and lots of people die. Another one that really disappointed me was the quest First Contact. It was so promising when you stumble across it. There's a big unknown ship orbiting around a vacation planet called Paradiso, and you can either go and see who these strangers are, or you can just blow the ship up if you want. It's got suspense, mystery, great lore, and an impactful story, multiple choices and endings. Yet it also comes up short. It's one of my favorite side quests in the entire game, but I still was feeling empty and disappointed. Like, that's it? That's all that happens? Starfield has a lot of fetch quests, but what really bugs me is there is a crazy amount of deliver message quests. Why am I delivering messages between people? We can fly through the vastness of space, but we can't telephone each other? Why am I acting like a mailman? Look, before you sit there and type out a whole book in the comments about how hard it would be to set up communication over an unfathomable amount of distance, so is traveling. If they can create a grav drive, they can create the space telephone. I think this being a sci-fi universe with very advanced civilization and technology is what ticks me off about the message quest. There's no internet or landlines in Tamriel, and everything has been nuked in Fallout, so some people needing a message delivered makes sense. Starfield though? Why am I wasting precious fuel and traveling between galaxies just to tell someone their aunt said hello? On that note, why do I have to run up to people to have a conversation with them? I understand having to be face to face to have a serious discussion sometimes, but if all you want to say is a few words and thank me for the quest I just did for you, then you can call me and wire me the credits, please. If I've already talked to an NPC, can we just exchange numbers, emails, Twitters? Also, is there no space Amazon or FedEx or something? I almost feel like the Constellation should be a parcel delivery company instead of an exploring group. It would make sense considering how many filler quests there are. I'm also going to lump in random encounters here because they're kind of like mini side quests. If you're walking around collecting plants and killing some bugs, doing your little survey or bounty mission or whatever, and all of a sudden you hear the roar of a ship descending from the sky and landing somewhere in the distance, I highly recommend that you ignore it completely. Running to these ships are a massive slap in the face. Waste of time. Some of the absolute worst random encounters I've ever seen in a video game. The first time I ever ran to one of these ships, it was a group of settlers asking me for some water, and that was it. I said to myself, okay, well, that was bad, but that can't be the norm, right? There's going to be something cool that happens with one of these encounters, I'm sure of it. Sometimes a ship lands to drop off like 4 bandits and then leaves, almost like they're marooning them because from what I've seen, they leave them in the middle of nowhere. One of the encounters is literally just some vanguard repairing their ship. That's it. No, hey, can you go fetch me some supplies to fix my ship? No, nothing. The space random encounters, on the other hand, were pretty decent and usually had some sort of humor attached, like the one where they ask you about your ship's extended warranty. They usually end with you either giving some ship supplies or a random dogfight, but it's a lot better than the ground encounters. If you've played this game long enough, then you've probably heard of the Red Mile and how exciting and dangerous it is. Only the best of the best compete, and no one comes out unscathed. You get to the lounge and it looks prestigious enough. They even sell this amazing energy drink that for some reason doesn't have any negatives to it, and the benefits are pretty crazy, giving you movement speed and a decent amount of oxygen regen. This place is supposed to be legendary, and hearing how the NPCs talked about the Red Mile across the stars hyped me up. So when the Freestar Collective quest takes you there, I was super excited. I wasn't sure what exactly it was, but the way it was explained, it sounded like a gladiator-style gauntlet. You try to run and fight past monsters to get to a button, push it, and try to get back. So I get some runner's rush and some amp ready, said a quick speech, and start my run. Easiest thing I've done in this entire game. I thought, okay, maybe they made it extra easy the first time because it's connected to the faction quest, so I give it another go, and I'm just as disappointed. The only real reason that you would run the Red Mile is because of faction quest, or maybe if you desperately need some easy credits. There's even an NPC who beat this thing 28 times, which makes me feel like this competition isn't even that hard lore-wise. It's also annoying because if you want to beat his record, you have to run it 30 times. By the way, the reward's totally not worth it. It's like a spit in the face from Bethesda. Screw you and your precious time. You spent hours trying to beat this NPC's record. Here's a wall mount. The takeaway for this is, if you're going to have a lot of filler quests in your game, a good way to break up the dullness is to have some amazing, larger, lore-rich side quests. Something with its own little storyline, side boss, some unique locations and items. I'd rather have a few impactful side quests than an infinite amount of garbage. Before I get into the companion section, I just want to say, why is there no pirate companion? I mean, seriously, why? And before you say, actually, you can do the Crimson Fleet questline and you can recruit one of those pirates. No, I mean, why isn't there a main pirate companion that is fully fleshed out with their own storyline? What were they thinking? Okay, now that that's off my chest, let's talk about the main companions that Starfield has to offer, which is only 4 by the way. That's right, over 1,000 planets to explore, but only 4 major companions, and each one of them having maybe 3 combat lines. Seriously, I got so tired of hearing Sarah say, "You picked the wrong day to piss me off," that I had to switch her out after I married her. Sorry honey, but you're annoying AF. Not only is there no pirate companion, but the 4 goobers they do give you are all cookie cutter the same. You would think people coming from vastly different backgrounds and cultures would have some pretty significant differences, some strong opinions and ways of doing stuff. Instead, they kind of all blend together. It doesn't really matter who you choose to bring with you on your adventures because your experience is going to be the same, including very similar likes and dislikes. Most decisions that the player makes, all 4 of them are likely going to nag your ear off about it. You're almost better off just taking the superfan with you because at least he'll support you unconditionally. They're all disconnected from their original backgrounds. They still have some semblance of the culture they came from, but they don't have any real ties with any party except for the Constellation. And all 4 of them also seem to get along pretty decently. There's not a speck of conflict or drama in the Constellation. Also, it would have been cool if we had some companions from the side factions like an ex-operative from Ryujin Industries, or a seasoned veteran pilot from the Vanguard, or, once again, a pirate. There are a whole bunch of generic companions you can find in bars and random places that are mostly there for their skill sets. Like if you want some better firepower on your ship, you can hire someone for that. Some of these people have some interesting backstories, and it's just a shame because they would have made for some great fleshed out companions instead of extras. There are some companions that you at least unlock after quests that involve them. Like it's cool how you can get Lynn and Heller as companions after going through so much with them, or how you can recruit Autumn after you complete the Freestar quest line. My favorite side companion is Amelia Earhart because her background is very unique and I actually felt bad about leaving her behind. The main issue I have with Starfield's treatment of companions is that they did the bare minimum. They gave each one of the main companions a personal storyline and assumed it was enough. Yeah, they have quite a bit of dialogue. It's debatable how good it is, but they do have a lot of feelings at least, right? Except they don't even leave you if you commit gruesome crimes. They'll just nag you. If you watch this Lex Friedman interview with Todd Howard, when they discuss relationships and companions, Todd makes it seem like it was going to be more complex than Fallout 4. If you do something that your romantic partner dislikes, for example, they'll need some space, but will eventually come back to you after cooling off. In reality, this ended up being a little bit too true. Sarah should not forgive me after 24 hours for mowing down citizens in the city that she loves. The conversation your companions have with you after you make them angry makes me feel like I cheated on them and not, this. There is nothing complex about the relationships in this game. It is a very linear experience. I would argue that Fallout 4's companions are way better. They have diverse opinions, some of them hate each other, and you can straight up murder some of them. Hell, if you don't side with the faction that a companion is aligned with, they will attack you on sight. Even the way you discover the companions in Fallout 4 is better. You find them along the way, and some are progression locked, so that you can't find them until a certain point. Certain decisions can prevent them from ever joining. In Starfield, you meet and unlock all 4 companions in a few short missions, and it's a lot less exciting. Andresia is supposed to be the whole stealthy assassin type character with questionable morals, or at least she should be. Instead, she dislikes you breaking the law, any shady choices you make. I get that she's supposed to be the conflicted character who's trying to make a change, but I really wish they went that route with a different companion and instead went all in with Andresia being the morally gray one. The companions' personal quests are all okay, somewhat mid. Sarah's was probably my favorite, with traveling around to areas that she was stranded and trying to find her lost crew's remains, only to find a little brat. A lot of people didn't like Barrett's quest, but I find it to be underrated. Seeing Barrett fight for his late husband was really cool. The writing was decent, and it was a very mature story. Sam's was okay. It was mostly family drama, and for some reason a catch-up party. The ending where you fight waves of bandits was really boring. Overall, I'm disappointed in the companions of Starfield. On the one hand, some of the stories and dialogue has some pretty decent writing, but on the other hand, it just wasn't enough. I'm not saying that they have to have a super crazy companion who's bloodthirsty and insane, because it doesn't really fit the theme of the game, but they should have had someone who was evil, or at the very least, extremely shady. Someone who, if I snipe an NPC that I don't like, they're not gonna mind. I'm giving the Starborn their own section because I think it deserves to be talked about outside of the main campaign. Years ago, when I first heard about Starfield, I was so excited about what they were going to cook up for the special ability. In Skyrim, you got shouts, Fallout, you got VATS, and for a futuristic sci-fi, I had so many ideas. Are there going to be brain implants? Are we going to be cyborgs? Maybe some nanotechnology stuff, or maybe they'll get spicy with it, and it'll be some xenografting with alien species. Maybe we'll be able to pilot some giant mech suits. What did they end up giving us, though? Dragon Shouts 2.0. You know, at the time, people thought Dragon Shouts were actually kind of pointless because we had spells. I personally think the shouts were always really cool, but regardless of what your opinion is, I'm sure that we can all agree they were at least way cooler than the Starborn stuff. I remember getting all the Dragon Shouts and all of their upgrades, and it was just so dull and repetitive. But now, compared to how you get Starborn powers, I feel grateful. Yeah, fighting the 1000th dragon at their nest to get an upgrade was bad, but there's nothing at these Starborn temples. I'd rather fight 50 High Dragon Priests in a row to get my upgrades than float around hitting music notes 240 times. The Starborn themselves, they're kind of lame. They're supposed to be these immortal superhero people who have unthinkable lived experiences, yet I sneeze on them and they die. I mean, their tactics are horrible. Like, they just spawn in front of you with no plan. The first time it was a surprise, sure, but the second time you're like, oh, okay, so I should just always expect one of these nincompoops every time I go to these temples. Also, why do they spawn after I get the power from the temple? They're not doing a good job guarding anything. We don't really get much interaction with the Starborn other than the Hunter and the Emissary, which kinda sucks. They could have had some pretty interesting side missions or even a faction quest line dedicated to the Starborn to make them more interesting. There is speculation that they'll make a DLC for the Starborn, but honestly, I would have rather they focused more on them in the main game, since they're one of the biggest mysteries. The only way I could forgive them is if they made a second game fully expanding on the Starborn, but who knows? Bethesda does like to leave some mysteries unknown. Okay, so what about their powers though? Are the powers worth going through the tedious process of unlocking? Now, I didn't unlock powers until like level 30 because you already know I was side questing it up. So I was really confused when all of a sudden superpowers were in play. It felt extremely out of place. I don't know if it's because I played so much of the game without powers that my view on them is a bit biased, but once I started acquiring them, I would completely forget that I had them. Every once in a while, I'd be like, oh yeah, I have superpowers, maybe I should use them a bit. I just found them underwhelming. I mean, when you have guns like these that absolutely shred everything you come across, do you really need to fart out a gravity field? Maybe if the combat was more challenging, then there would be more of a need to use the powers? Story-wise, I didn't like the Starborn stuff, and combat-wise, I don't think it meshes well either. Like I said before, I was expecting something sciencey at least. Anything tech-related would have made more sense on a battlefield. I mean, give us a shoulder cannon or something, I don't know. Anything would have also made for some more interesting enemy variety. If we take a look at the 24 powers themselves, a lot of them kind of look interesting on paper, but then fall short in usage. A lot of the combat stuff just ends up being forgotten, even with the upgrades that you can get for them. They're not all bad though, and the most used ones are star stuff and the GOAT itself, personal atmosphere. If you're not a fan of the Starborn powers, you can at least make great use of these two. There's also some underrated ones like the Eternal Harvest. Precognition is not only good for looking at NPCs' pathways, but you can also use it to see what your dialogue choices lead to, giving you an easier way to pick the outcome you want. The best combat Starborn power has got to be the Face Time one. If you're in a pinch, just use this puppy and you'll easily destroy all of your enemies. This might be a hot take, but I don't think Starfield is an RPG. Sure, it has RPG elements like being open world, having character creation, and numbers go up, but do these elements really matter if the quality feels like an afterthought? Starfield has the bare bone requirements to make a game a role-playing experience. It's a all roads lead to Rome, linear game where all of the little choices you make are inconsequential. I talked about this a little bit in my Bannerlord video. Using your imagination to fill in the gaps doesn't make a game an RPG, especially if your game doesn't have the mechanics or storytelling needed to support your imagination. If imagination is enough, then that makes literally any game an RPG. And I guess if that's your philosophy, then that's fair. But I think that there should be a more concrete definition so that we don't allow games to falsely label themselves. Let's be honest, Starfield is a FPS action adventure. I've seen people say things like, I roleplay as an explorer who scans planets all day. And you know what? Good for you. I mean it. It's cool that you like that aspect of the game and can roleplay for yourself, but that doesn't mean that the game has good role-playing mechanics. It's like the housing situation. Yeah, you can get some cool houses, but what's the point? You can't even decorate them that well, and there's never much of a point of going to them. It would have made more sense for them to go all in on the traveling lifestyle that you do with your ship, having a fully implemented decor system for the rooms on your ships. There are even less options for killing important NPCs in this game than previous games, and the quests where you do have to kill someone, you can't use the non-lethal EM weapons to knock the target out. On a side note, you don't get personalized loot anymore, so killing a pirate that wielded a pistol and looting a grenade launcher off of them is a bit immersion breaking. There also doesn't seem to be much overlap between side quest and main quest either, which can also break immersion. And the main mission, Shadows and Neon, you need some information from a worker, but for him to give it to you, he needs help with the Syndicate gang. I had already finished the Epside Strikers questline. At the end, I chose to take out the Syndicate gang. So why is this guy still having trouble with them? I'm sure you could say that maybe there are still some stragglers or something, but what they should have done is have the NPC say, oh wow, I recognize you. You're the crazy person who took out the Syndicate gang. You have no idea how much you've helped me. I had a lot of debt since my brother passed away. I'll be glad to give you any information you need. Something like this would have been great because it adds immersion and it makes side quests feel impactful and rewarding. I'll never understand why RPGs have character creation but then no real interactions that show your character. It makes spending so much time making your character a yesified slay queen feel pointless. This is the reason why I liked Fallout 4's dynamic camera so much, because it made your character seen. I know the character having a voice was a major issue for a lot of fans, but I mean, why can't we have the dynamic character without the voice? Just slap on some facial expressions and it's golden. I just want to see my dude more. I guess you could argue that you see your character whenever you choose to, but who does that? I don't really feel the need to just stare at my character or go and sit down on a bench third person. If you like to do that, that's cool, but it's not enough for me to justify caring about the face making in this game. Even with the workbenches, you just stare at your character from the back in third person. They could have used a more flattering personal angle. The screenshotting feature is the one thing that takes it from being a completely useless feature to a almost completely useless feature. I love the poses and facial expressions you can give you and your companion. I've made some interesting photos, and the best part is that they automatically become loading screens. Traits were something that shocked me. I was so happy and giddy when I was picking my traits my first playthrough. I think they did a pretty good job with balancing them so that they're not all just must-have picks. Like the Taskmaster trait allows you to automatically repair your ship, but at the cost of all crew members being twice as expensive, or the Extrovert trait allowing you to use less oxygen when a companion is by your side, but when you're alone you use more. I like that they used a double-edged sword approach here. My absolute favorite traits have got to be the kid stuff and hero worship traits. They really cooked with these two. The Adoring Fan is a bit polarizing for some people, but I personally think he's the best companion in the game, even though I wish he had his own quest line to do. Choosing the parents, though, was just so amazing. By allowing the people who want to roleplay not having a family and being a complete loner, and allowing the ones who want a deeper connection to your character's upbringing, was one of the best decisions they ever made for this game. They also did a really good job with how you interact with your parents, too. It's not just you meeting them and having a few lines with them. They also pop up while you're out doing your business. Every time I found them, I was shocked and enjoyed every second of it. Them showing up in the middle of one of the main quests and embarrassing you in front of your colleagues was so cute. Finding them in that raggedy-ass zoo was hilarious. Then they go and shock me even more by giving me a crazy expensive ship. It was actually a pretty decent one too. It became my main one while I saved up on credits. I can't compliment these two traits enough. They did such a good job with them. Not all the traits are showy, but still nice for role-playing, like choosing your religion or where you grew up gives you some extra dialogue options. Plus, as a bonus, is that they listened to the fans and eventually added being able to change your traits on a new game plus, which was something that you could not do when the game was launched, so kudos to them. The last thing that I'll say about the traits is that I wish we could start the game based on our traits instead of just the generic opening. If you choose to be from Neon, you should start out on Neon. If you choose the Freestar Collective, should start with being chased by a herd of Ashta. Unfortunately, companies don't like to go this route anymore because they think it takes too much time. I'm not saying they should have added intelligent alien races. Not every sci-fi has to have tall, skinny blue guys or have a billion different alien races that are basically just human. Bethesda was trying to make a more grounded environment, and I totally get that. But at the same time, I feel like this would have been their time to shine. They're good at making interesting species and races with rich lore and political interactions. With such a large portion of our galaxy at play, I think they would have done a great job with aliens. Since there aren't any intelligent alien races in the game, something I would expect would be for your looks to have a social impact. For example, if you give your character red eyes, people should question if you're a red devil, especially on Mars. At the very least, they should notice what clothing or armor you are wearing. If I'm kitted out in full ecliptic armor, a guard could say something like, you're one of those ecliptic guys, huh? My cousin has a friend named Mike who joined up not too long ago. Ever heard of him? If you're wearing spacer armor, they could say, whoa, what are you doing in the city, pal? I should arrest you here now. Oh, you got that off a spacer you killed? Nice one. I'll buy you a drink. They don't comment on your weapons either. If I have a Varun rifle walking around in New Atlantis, I would expect someone to freak out. None of these examples exist though, and not only is it disappointing, but it's a step back. Okay, let's get into the gameplay section. I've seen a lot of fans talk about how good the gunplay is in Starfield, and if you had just got done beating one of the Fallout games, then I guess that praise would make sense. I mean, let's be honest, anything is an upgrade from those games, and I love Fallout. This isn't me being a hater, but come on, it was pretty mid. With Fallout 4, they rebuilt the gun mechanics, and it was a pretty big upgrade from Fallout 3, but going from Fallout 4 to Starfield, the difference is mostly that it looks slightly better. I think the gunplay is still extremely stiff. I feel like I'm an action figure and not one of those cool action figures that have a lot of joints that you can move around and make cool poses with. No. These types of action figures that your family found for a nickel at the next door neighbor's garage sale. The gunplay, stiff. The melee, stiff. The enemies, stiff. Sarah, stiff. There is nothing fluid about this game. I can get over stiff gameplay if it's good gameplay, like a lot of variety and weapons and enemy types, different ways to approach combat, dynamic situations, and cool perks are some examples that make great gameplay. Unfortunately, while Starfield does have some positives, it doesn't do very well in most departments. I've seen the excuse that this isn't an FPS game, this is an RPG. Why are we focusing so much on a combat? But I'm sorry, this game is hardly an RPG, like we just went over, and even if it is an RPG, it's still an FPS RPG. Sure, it's not a competitive multiplayer shooter, but the entire game you hold some sort of weapon in your hand. The entire core of the gameplay is shooting stuff. I don't think combat is the worst thing about the game, and at times it can be enjoyable, but it leaves a lot to be desired. For example, why didn't they do limb and head damage for this game? I think it would have fit in pretty well, but they chose to be super PG in this regard. There's futuristic laser guns, but no disintegration. In terms of weapon variety, I think Starfield only delivers halfway. First, I will say that they have a great amount of weapons available. There is a lot of stuff to try, and as you progress through the game, there is a steady amount of new weapons to discover. I also like the different styles, like you have the futuristic ballistic guns, as well as the old style earth ones. And then there's the energy and particle beam weapons, and of course the heavy weapons. They did a good job at differentiating all of the designs, and I still remember finding my first Varun weapon and being blown away at how unique it was. They also did a good job with all of the crazy attachments that you can customize with, adding to the already insane amount of variety. While there is a ton of variety, there are two major problems with this weaponry. One, there's no unique one-of-a-kind weapons, and two, the melee. There are some named weapons here and there, like for example, we can take a look at the pistol that you get from having the parents trait. It's literally just the old Earth pistol with a different name. Nothing special about it. It doesn't shoot differently. It doesn't have a crazy mod that's unique to it. No unique perk. It doesn't even have a special skin. Yes, there are a ton of different guns in this game, but I would honestly sacrifice a few of them for some wonky cool stuff like the Cryolator or the Daedric artifacts. How cool would it have been to find something special from one of the Starborn? A seasoned Starborn that's gone through the Unity dozens of times and found some crazy rocket launcher. There are a few guns that have a skin on them, for example the Justifier, which has an oil spill pattern on it, and also Acid Rain, which is just a Grendel, but it's green. The skins are low effort Call of Duty type skins, and once again, they don't have any special unique perks. I mean, the Acid Rain has a guaranteed corrosive perk, but you can get that on any gun. Other than that, the attachments and perks are randomized, like how it is in Fallout 4. And as for the melee, well, it just sucks. You have to dump a ton of perk points and use certain Starborn powers for it to be viable, and even then you're just better off using the guns. Don't get me wrong, you can just run up on enemies and slash them to death because that's how easy this game is, but it's going to take longer, so you might as well just take the shorter route with bullets. It's also disappointing that they didn't take any creative liberties with the melee weapons. I would have loved to see some sort of mech fist like the Power Fist, or maybe a weapon made of alien parts. In terms of enemy variety, it might be the biggest flaw in Starfield combat. For humans, you basically got two types of enemies, ones that shoot at you and ones that charge at you with melee. Alien creatures that you find when exploring planets just all charge at you except the rare terrormorphs that can use the ranged scream attack. Oh yeah, and then you got the pathetic robot enemies that are just humans reskinned as Vasco, because you got the shooters and then you got the ones that charge at you. It's really disappointing because it's not challenging at all. You're just shooting static enemies who react sluggishly and have the tactics of a simpleton. Now, this isn't a new problem, especially with the more recent Bethesda games, where higher difficulty just means everyone turns into a bullet sponge and that's basically it. At least these games gave some enemies special abilities or tactics. Panicking while trying to take down the mutant that's running towards you with a literal mini nuke is frightening. Assaultrons are agile and can go invisible, making them a tough enemy. You can shoot a Mr. Gutsy and make it go on a frenzy. Vampires use lifesteal attacks, and Draugr lords can use shouts. Human factions from both games use vastly different types of weapons and armor. Yes, enemy tactics in Fallout 4 and Skyrim aren't perfect or very challenging, but it was at least something. There were a robust amount of different groups, factions, countries, all having their own diverse opinions, politics, personalities, and unique combatants. You're not fighting the same single copy-pasted enemy the entire game. You're fighting mutants that have crazier personalities than your average wasteland raider. Kind of horrific considering they're basically humans with super cancer. You're fighting a faction that hoards technology for themselves and wears the unstoppable power armor. Synthetic humans who are a gray area because they're not human, but they also seem to have their own wants and needs. There are a lot of bandits and Draugr in Skyrim, but there are also giants who love their mammoths, Falmer with their screwed up backstories, and dwarven constructs left behind by their masters. Then you have the enemies in Starfield. Yeah, you see the difference? All of the humans you fight wear slightly different outfits, scream and yell out the same stuff, have the same personalities and the same tactics. Sometimes they use different types of weapons, but that's about it. Yes, in previous games, the enemies might not be hard, but at least I don't get as bored fighting the same people over and over. These factions, if you can even call them that, are just all bandits. You got spacers, who are your run-of-the-mill bandits. You got the Ecliptic, who are mercenaries, which are basically bandits that get paid. And then you have the Crimson Fleet, who are LARPing as pirates, which are also bandits. Don't worry though, I'm sure they'll make up for it with something interesting, challenging, and lore-rich, like bosses, right? Wrong! Before I go too hard into it, I will say that the final boss is pretty decent and memorable, but the in-between bosses are what's lackluster in both creativity and the amount of them. Usually Bethesda has different types of bosses. You got your usually storyline bosses that are tied to the quest, dungeon bosses that are a stronger variation of the normal enemy, then you got the big special bosses that put the fear of the gods into you. There just aren't any real bosses or special enemies in this game, and it really sucks. I mean, you have the generic legendary enemies every once in a while, but there's nothing special about them other than they deal more damage and have more health. The only thing that really stands out is the Terrormorph, which is the closest to the iconic creatures of the past games like Deathclaws, Behemoths, Dragons, Giants, but the Terrormorph was super underutilized. They're tied to a single quest line, and outside of specific areas, you very rarely encounter them. And also, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think the Terramorph lives up to some of the other iconic beasts. I think they're cool, and first meeting one was terrifying, but I was expecting them to be a bit more sapient considering their intelligence. How cool would it have been to find a small group of Terramorphs who just want to survive and are willing to negotiate? I think that if they had a side quest line exploring more of that route and then added another special alien monster, the game's boss situation would have been miles better than what it is now. There's not many bosses tied to quest lines either, and the few ones that we do have are lame as hell. Nobody that truly stands out or that the player has any real attachments to, unless you count the emissary if you choose to fight them. Kellogg, for example, was a good boss because it was personal. He killed your spouse and kidnapped your child. It's really sad because we're so used to having a large variety of enemies and bosses with diverse cultures and personalities. Starfield really dropped the ball, and it's probably one of the worst things I'm most disappointed in. We can't talk about combat without talking about the spaceship combat. I'm going to be upfront here and just give Bethesda the credit they deserve. It's actually solid. It is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. What really pulls it together is being able to customize the ships and the community coming together with all the wacky designs. The variety when it comes to all the different ship parts and weapon systems you can buy is insane. I personally don't spend a whole lot of time messing around with the customization because it's not really my thing, but it's something that I can appreciate from the outside. All I've seen is enthusiastic reviews from people who are into this type of stuff. The combat itself is pretty fun, and while it can get repetitive, it's a nice break from the even more repetitive first-person shooter combat. It has the same issue with the enemy variety, but it's a little harder to notice just because you don't dogfight as much. I just wish there was some huge boss ships. Like, yeah, there's a few legendary ships out there, but I want something with some girth to fight. The most unique thing about ship combat is the slow-mo ability that allows you to target ship parts, and if you damage a certain part enough, it'll affect their ship in a certain way. Like if you target their shields and they won't be able to generate any more shield. My favorite thing to target is either the engine or their weapon system because it's kind of funny watching them sit there helpless. If you're a Fallout fan, you might think, hey, isn't this just VATS? And yeah, it is, but honestly, the way that they implemented it really shakes things up and makes ship combat a lot more fun, so I'm not mad at it. Something else you could do with the VATS mechanic is if you target and destroy their engines, you can actually dock and board an enemy ship, which is really, really cool. It reminds me of the Black Flag days. The only thing that I could complain about is the fact that there wasn't enough quests around ship combat other than, oh, go here and take out this small cluster of bandit ships. A big complaint when a game first came out was that we can't actually traverse through space, and I'm not sure if I fully agree with that, but I would like some more interesting missions where we have to fly around in an area and find ships and reach an end goal. And finally, to tie up the combat section of this video, let's talk about combat approach and throwables. I'm throwing these two together, but I feel it's still worth talking about. I've already mentioned melee builds aren't the greatest because of how slow and wonky it is, but stealth has a sort of different problem. The map layouts in this game are more like straightforward arenas, which makes stealth a lot more awkward to carry out. Most of the enemies are within 5-10 feet of each other, and as soon as you take a shot, even with perks, it tends to alert everyone. Now, I haven't really fully explored going stealth in this game, so I'm sure there are some people who can make it work, but even making it somehow work, I don't think Bethesda really made any of these layouts with stealth in mind. This includes certain specific stealth missions too. And lastly, we have throwables. I mean, yeah, I guess they're fine. They aren't as impactful in this game as, say, the Fallout games, and honestly, I find myself using them even less than in those games. They just don't do much damage, and they take up a lot of weight, so I end up selling most of them except maybe some basic grenades. I'm sure you can find some use for the mines, like piling a whole bunch in one area. It's just quicker to use guns. I only ever use the grenades if someone's hiding behind cover. I wanted my perk section of this video to be really long, but I'm looking at it right now, it's like 3 paragraphs. Unfortunately, I really wanted to like the perks of this game, but it's mostly just percentage increases, and I am not a big fan of spending hard-earned skill points on doing 10% more damage, so I'm really not a fan when there's 17 different combat perks and all of them are just incremental percentage increases. There are some stuff that are locked behind perks, like being able to pilot specific ships or using certain weapons until you unlock whatever perk. There's also the crafting perks where you grind XP to unlock being able to craft certain items like chicken nuggies. Stuff like this is a little bit more rewarding because you're actually able to work towards something, but I would prefer if they added a few more mechanic changing perks in the game. A major problem that a lot of open world games tend to have is that they're too big with nowhere near enough content to fill all of the space. Bethesda, uniquely, usually didn't have this problem. If we look at Skyrim and Fallout 4, these games have dense maps that are full of beautiful landscapes, interesting encounters, secrets to find, and they feel a lot bigger than they are because of how many unique locations they have. Obviously, space travel was going to be a thing in Starfield, so I understood the exploration was going to be a lot different. I, as well as everyone else, was excited to see how they would handle it. But when I found out there would be over 1,000 planets to explore, my expectations dropped drastically. Let's talk about procedural generation, since there's pretty much an infinite amount of it in Starfield. When people hear the words procedurally generated, they think it's lazy, it's low quality, there's a lot of stigma towards it. The thing is though, a lot of open world games use it as a sort of canvas. They generate the map and then mold it and build on top of it. ProcGen is a tool that has been used for a very long time, and some of the best games have used some form of it. But a lot of companies don't like to talk about it, or straight up deny using it because it tends to overshadow how much work they've done. Even if developers use ProcGen to spread out some handcrafted foliage, grass, and trees over a map that they made, people still give them a hard time about it. Just like any tool, there are different ways to use it. Some great, some not so great. How much is a game relying on it? Are they handcrafting everything and only using it as a base, or are they just generating a map and not doing much to it? In Skyrim, for example, they generated the map, and then they terraformed it and handcrafted everything, including all of the locations and landmarks. Starfield, on the other hand, is mostly just procedurally generated. And I mean, it kind of has to be considering the sheer amount of places you can travel to. Basically, when you choose a spot on a planet to land, the game generates a map for you, and in this map, there are some handcrafted locations like the landmarks that you can scan, and the buildings with the enemies and loot inside. The main issue is that there is nowhere near enough content in any of the planets, even the populated ones. Yes, the POIs are handcrafted, but they're copy and pasted a million times over. The trade-off for this amount of quantity is obviously going to be quality, and oh boy, does the quality suffer. All it takes is a couple of side missions, a few bounties, some of those planet surveys, or maybe just going off on a solo trip to explore some of these places, and you have seen it all. The same buildings over and over, with the same layouts, and the same exact enemy placements, with the same exact loot containers, and the same exact outcome every single time. They did a good job on the environments with the plant and animal life. Sometimes you come across a mesmerizing landscape or a wacky creature. There's just nothing to do with any of it. Why would I want to adventure through these planets with no rhyme or reason, just scanning the same shit over and over? Mowing down a herd of alien creatures is only fun for a couple of seconds before you realize you have no clue what you're actually doing here. The argument for these empty, nothing-to-do planets is that it's realistic because there's not many humans, and this is what untouched planets look like. That's fine and all, but this isn't an educational NASA project. This is a sci-fi video game with an extensive combat system with quests and stories. There needs to be a reason to explore these planets, and doing the same 5 repeatable boring quests is not it. There are some major cities that humanity managed to set up on a few of these planets, from the futuristic metropolis known as New Atlantis, to the cyberpunk-inspired Neon City, to the rustic, I guess is the best word to describe Aquila City. Bethesda has always done a pretty good job at presenting the first major settlement to the player, and it's no different in Starfield. My first experience landing in New Atlantis spaceport and going through the checkpoint was exciting, and I couldn't wait to explore. It's my favorite city. I mean, they just nailed how big it is with all the different shops, restaurants, and military buildings and skyscrapers. The train is nice because it gives the illusion of depth. Like, wow, I can walk to this part of the city, but it's quicker to take the train. Then there's this huge gritty underground where the poor peasants dwell, with its own lore and side quests. New Atlantis does have its problems, like how there is a lot of wasted space, and most of the quests here are god-awful fetch quests, and also it's not as flashy as I think it should be. Some of the shops are kind of hard to notice, which is weird for a futuristic city, and when you zoom out, it really isn't that big of a place, but hey, video game cities aren't usually in a realistic scale. I think some people have a hard time grasping that, just because this city is said to have millions of people. It doesn't mean they can realistically exactly represent that in a game, but for me, this is a huge city that I think they did a good job on. Then you have Aquila City, where the contrast is insane. I'm in no way against a space cowboy style faction, but golly gee whiz, this place sucks. They can hardly defend themselves from like rhino puppies. It's small, it's filled with mud because they have no pavement for some reason, and it seems they're in a desolate wasteland. I can kind of get behind the aesthetic of what they were going for with the stone and wood buildings, but this is supposed to be the capital of the Freestar Collective. You know, the people who won the war against the UC. It's hard to believe that this quaint little town is the home base for the faction that built giant advanced war mechs. It's like Bethesda just wanted a cowboy city, but didn't put any real thought into it. What really sucks is that these cities are the only cities on their prospective planets. It's lazy, it's lame, it doesn't make sense, and yet I've seen so many people defend it over the past 2 years now. I'm not saying that every planet should have billions of people thriving, spread out everywhere, but come on, no second major settlement on Jamison? Not even a notable town, a village? The only planet that gets a pass is Voli Alpha because it's an ocean planet, so Neon City is unique enough on its own there. But if the Freestar Collective has the capacity and resources to spread out over multiple planets, why would they not try to populate their capital planet first? There are some very nice biomes they're missing out in Aquila. To make matters worse, there's really only 3 cities in the game. 4 if you count the key, which GameRant.com does for some reason. But that's still only 4 cities. 4 cities and over 1,000 empty-ass planets. To be fair, there are some smaller settlements that are unique, like New Homestead, Paradiso, Gagarin, Hopetown, Sidonia, just to name a few. Starfield stands will try to make you believe that there are hundreds and hundreds of unique POIs, when in reality, they're just counting the same buildings in different environments. It doesn't matter if Pirate Outpost number 5 is in a forest, a desert, or a tundra. It's the same building with the same exact layout and the same exact enemies, the same exact loot placements. That's not unique, and it gets extremely repetitive very fast. The copium I've seen for being so many planets is, bro, you don't get it. You're not supposed to explore all 1,000 planets. They're there for immersion, to make you feel small in the vastness of space. The planets being empty is realistic. It's actually so cool. I guess I just don't get it. This isn't some small, quirky extra feature. This is one of the main selling points of the game, so I expect it to be fleshed out and fun. Could you imagine if you downloaded Minecraft and there was barely anything to mine and like 5 things to craft? No, you guys don't get it. Minecraft is about fighting zombies. Mining ores is just for the immersion. You don't actually do anything with them. Are you crazy? And for the people who say that exploration isn't one of the main features of the game, come on, be so for real right now. The Constellation, the group that you're a part of, and is the core faction of the main story, is an exploration group. The entire main story is centered around exploration, and there are a lot of side quests that are centered around exploration. The dialogue with the 4 main companions is mostly about exploration, how they got into it, how much they love it, what it means to them. To find Starborn powers, you have to touch down on a planet, pull out your scanner, and guess what? Explore until you find a temple. They didn't add 1,000 planets for the ambiance. They did it to pad out the game, to get as many player hours as they possibly could. I don't actually hate the idea of how they designed the mapping system. It could work. I just don't think for a Bethesda style RPG, being able to land on any part of a planet and get different biomes and resources depending on where you land is dope as hell. If Bethesda wanted to, I think Starfield could have been a solid sandbox builder, traveling to different planets for specific resources, add in a better, more detailed crafting system, replace the shitty building system, and rework how the outposts are supposed to work. There are a lot of directions they could have went, but instead of taking a turn into a specific genre, they got lost in space instead. They bit off way more than they can chew and ended up coughing and spitting all over the place. Because of the overly ambitious amount of stuff they put into the game, everything suffers. Nothing has depth, but the exploration suffered the most. There is a reason this game is compared to No Man's Sky all the time. If Bethesda wanted to make a deep space exploration game, then that's what they should have done and focused on that. Maybe they were afraid of stepping away from their style of games. The last thing I'll talk about is Starfield's economy. When it comes to it, I have mixed feelings. I'll start with the positive. There is actually a reason to save and spend the currency. In a lot of games where you accrue money, there just ends up being not much to do with it. You just hoard it forever. You might feel like Mr. Moneybags in Starfield once you reach over 1 million credits, but then you hit up the local ship dealer and realize you ain't got nothing. You think, screw it, I'll just build my own ship. Only to realize that buying all those ship parts and weapons adds up way faster than you thought. Even just editing the ship you already own is costly. I love this. I don't do a ton of shipbuilding, but saving up enough credit to buy a nice luxurious ship and then customizing it to fit my needs is really rewarding. Stuff like this helps justify generic quests and selling off mountains of loot. Ammo being so expensive made me think more about what weapons I was using and was something you could dump money into, but then they added ammo crafting, so now I kind of wish there was something else to splurge your money on again, but I'm happy the ships are so expensive. The negative about the economy is that it just doesn't make sense. It's not clear how much a credit is worth. You can buy food for a couple of 100 credits, but doing a mission where you deliver some supplies in your giant spaceship across the stars will give you like 1,000 credits. That bounty where you risked your life and hunted a group of lunatic spacers, here's 3,000 credits. Hey, why don't you celebrate it with a bottle of wine? It costs 330 credits. Maybe I'll save a bit and get a chunks wine cube instead. To be fair, video game currency is always going to be wonky and it's never going to accurately compare to real life. The bigger issue in my opinion are the vendors. They should have scaled the vendors' available credit because it's so tedious having to wait 48 hours for a restock. I don't understand why they haven't learned from past complaints about this. The biggest moneymaker in Starfield is selling looted weapons, but you can only sell 2 or 3 before the vendor runs out of money. Also, why do sci-fis use credit as the chosen currency? I'm so over it. I know this is me being nitpicky, but man, call it something else for once. Something that would have helped circumvent the economy is being able to scrap junk. I was so sad finding out that they scrapped the scrapping mechanic. I already know the Stan argument. It's a different theme. Fallout makes sense because it's a wasteland. Starfield is a highly advanced chrome future. Okay, so build a super advanced scrapping machine that gives you perfect raw materials back or something. I don't know, it could be anything. It just feels so pointless there being so much junk everywhere and not being able to do anything with it. I get that having lots of movable objects with collision and wonky physics is Bethesda's thing, but Fallout 4 really elevated that by giving all of the objects a real use. Junk is junk again, and man does it suck. Look, the game isn't bad because it's not a carbon copy of previous Bethesda titles. It's bad because it's bad. People like to bring up how everyone hated on Skyrim and Fallout 4 when they first released, and over time people's minds changed and now everyone loves those games. The difference is those games have redeemable qualities. Starfield, not so much. Yes, Skyrim and Fallout 4 were hated on for being watered down versions of other previous titles, but there was still some heart and soul being poured into them. I also hate it when people use the amount of content a game has as an indicator of how good a game is. Starfield has an endless amount of content, sure, but the content itself is not that good, and a large portion of it is repeatable quest. There is a lot more wrong with Starfield than there is right. I give this game a 4 out of 10.